Hey, I'm Alex Southey, and you are listening to Your Worst Song. This is going to be the best quality one you have ever heard in terms of technical quality because it's the first that's actually been recorded in person. Dum da da da. Maybe I'll put some actual music in there, but if not, if all you heard was me going da 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 da, I didn't do that. And the guest is Michael Peter Olsen. So many stories. Really wanted to go into it with more of a untraditional philosophical bent towards my questions as opposed to answering them incredibly literally and simply, although we do by the end. But the first half or first 3/4 are a long roving conversation about a bunch of different things, but especially what it is to look back on your life at middle age as a musician and just pursuing arts only, and what you're left with, the good and the bad, and how and why you decide to forge on or not. And I really appreciate the honesty that he gave, in addition to so many great stories. Michael is a cellist. We talk a ton about that and the technology and the differences and the nuances to the differences. And he does his own thing, just as Michael Peter Olsen, and he also plays as a side cellist for a bunch of live great artists and also studio stuff. So check it out, check his music out, check everybody who references out. Hope you enjoy. I'm Alex Southey, and you're listening to Your Worst Song.
That makes sense because mine's a 58.
Okay,
Actually, you could turn mine up a little bit.
Sure, yeah, okay.
Because I'd like to try and not yell the entire time. That seems good.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, and you'll be able to talk, and when I get excited, it'll still be able to handle me.
Exactly. Okay, perfect. Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we finally made this happen.
Yes. There was only a giant snowstorm on the day we came. Eventually,
but it worked out, and you got a car. So that's kind of a nice thing. Can you give a shout out to Commune Auto?
Yeah, I will, because I like Commune Auto. Apparently, it takes every one of their cars takes 12 cars off the street of Toronto.
In what way? People don't need a personal car, so they'll just use that.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh.
I would be in favor of they apparently put a lot more cars on the road recently, and I'm kind of into that kind of car. And it's Canadian owned too.
I didn't know that. Wow. Okay, there are a bunch of good things about that company.
Yeah, it's not the best, but if they went full electric, it'd probably be even better. But
yeah, right. Actually,
yeah,
that's a really interesting idea. That the more because I think simply people can think car bad, bus or transit better in terms of environmental impact or whatever. And it's funny that now this car rental idea is somewhere in between that. It's like, okay, we're still using cars, but it's like 10 people own one.
Well, then, yeah, it's unfortunately, the whole city's set up to be used by cars, and sometimes you just friggin' need a car.
Yeah.
And if you can just own one with a bunch of people, then everyone just uses the car when they need it. It makes more sense.
Yeah, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I feel like if any university students have a Commune Auto station near them, they should all just go in and pay as if you're living with 10 or 8 people, all of you should just pay for one membership of Commune Auto.
The best thing with these is not the station. You guys should park them anywhere in the city.
Oh, and then you just pick up wherever they were left?
Yeah, which is what's actually great about it, because then it's I'm going to go get one over here and then drive and pay 40 cents a minute and then drop it off and don't pay.
Right, because that's the one kind of, I would say, annoying thing about what is otherwise a decent system, the bike share system in Toronto. Mm-hmm. It's pretty decent. It's for the price, whatever. But yeah, you do have to find a station to dock it at. And then especially, let's say you're taking it to a concert or something, the docks at those stations will already be full. So then, yeah.
With the cars, too, you got to make sure you don't park it in the wrong spot and then get a ticket. But, still pretty good.
That's true.
I mean, it's sort of like people saying all EV cars are good, but now they're starting to develop emission-free gas.
Oh, really?
So suddenly I'm well, that's going to be in a way better, because then we don't throw away 5 million cars. We just make all the current cars suddenly.
Yeah, if they can suddenly take a different thing, then that's better for the environment. Then great.
Imagine emission-free jet fuel. I'm sure it's coming.
Wow.
Then suddenly you could still use the old tech and don't have to throw it away.
Right,
like
right.
reuse the old stuff.
Yeah.
Like you can have a 1950s car that'll be zero emissions.
It's
pretty soon.
reduce, reuse, recycle. It's not just
Yeah.
recycle, right?
And like remember the batteries are also got lots of pollutants in them
Yeah,
too.
oh,
so
yeah.
it's like not perfect.
Thousands of years from now, just other inhabitants of the world are going to be finding batteries.
Yeah, a lot of batteries.
yeah.
But anyways, we don't talk about that.
We
We're
don't
gonna
have to talk
about,
too
like,
much about that.
Completely, superficial music things.
Yeah, exactly.
People are not here to hear this heavy shit.
No, I guess not. This heavy auto shit.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you brought up a really good idea for this, which is as much as it seems like you enjoy the podcast and that kind of thing, you thought it's, for our discussion, it might be more interesting to use the questions I've set up as more of a philosophical jumping off point about the like ephemeral nature of how satisfied you are with your music and how you write and that kind of thing. Am I correct about that?
Yeah, more or less. I kind of just thought, like, when you first asked me, I was like, okay, well, I've been around the music business for a very long time, but as a writer and composer, I've actually done relatively little material that's been released and relatively little material in general. As such, like, most of it's been later in life when I was already like a pretty handy producer, engineer, and worked with really great people. And so like everything I put out, except for maybe one vocal effect on one thing in 2013, I'm pretty much satisfied. I'm like, it's like, okay, that is what it is. It's great. It's kind of still what I wanted, and I don't have any reason to regret it, kind of. So
Well,
it's
do you want to take a very, very brief detour and tell me about that 2013 vocal effect, or are you making somewhat of a joke?
Well, I actually would love to. Yeah, I would have loved to just not do that one vocal effect. It was just like I had this song, and it was sort of like it was on my original Our Founders record, which
Okay.
is a solo project I put out in 2013. First time I tried to write anything. It's like singing acoustic guitar, vaguely Nick Drake-ish with like strings.
Lovely. Oh.
Yeah, it was nice. I got one of my audio gurus, like David Trevor Smith, amazing producer engineer, to like mix it for me, and it sounds really freaking good.
Would that
And
early Nick Drake be called like chamber folk at this point?
he could sort of
kind of thing?
I don't sound like Nick Drake as a singer, but it's like
No,
that,
but
like
instrumentation,
moody, like
yeah.
fingerstyle guitar with like epic
Very,
strings.
yes,
kind of.
totally. Riverman vibes.
Yeah, that vibe.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
There's definitely a Riverman-esque vibe to some of it. So, yeah, and that one track, I have this like synth on it. It's kind of goofy. I decided to put this sort of telephone effect on my voice, like I was talking on the phone. It's kind of part of the story. But now I hear it now, and I'm like, it's kind of annoying.
Annoying or dated, or what's the issue?
Maybe not even dated, just sort of like, it's just sort of like too much.
Okay.
It would have been better for me to just cut the vocal normally, but
Okay.
it's it's not even that most hideous misstep. It's just sort of like, I would have done one thing different, but everything else of the record, I'm like, it just kind of sounds perfect. I mean,
Wow.
maybe I wouldn't make that music now, but for what it is
But
at
as
the
it
time,
is, yes,
you know,
wow.
it's what I was doing. It was like, I remember years after I put it out, I was like, oh, this is what it was supposed to be. So I can't very well be upset about that.
Wow. No, that's very. I assume that feels very satisfying and rewarding to look back, even if you look back and go, I don't quite feel the same as the person who made this anymore.
Yeah.
But I still like it for what it is and remember the goalposts at the time,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I made choices that I thought were good. I mean, like, and I listened to it and I'm like, oh, it has lots of merit to it. You
Yeah,
know?
right.
Even I wouldn't make the music again because my tastes have changed.
Yes.
But like, except for the one vocal effect, I'm like, good job, dude.
Well, maybe that's an interesting question to get into, even, or just take us down the slightly more abstract road, just in terms of how does your music taste change? Do you think it's just as simple as, oh, suddenly I'm hearing more, there's this ripple effect from what's going on in the music industry, and I'm influenced by that, and so I end up hearing, like I bet a lot of people now after the Super Bowl are going to be checking out Kendrick Lamar, right?
Yeah.
It's just a ripple effect of culture, and it seeps in or it doesn't, and that's how you kind of get into new stuff. Or are you finding new stuff through the family tree of genre?
Kind of both, I guess. It's
Okay.
just exposure in the end.
It's all exposure, yeah.
You get used to things too. I reflect upon, like, when I first came to Toronto, I really liked the Rheostatics, the band.
Yeah.
I was a huge fan. And then by some fortuitous set of circumstances, 6 months after I got here, I was like on stage playing with him, which was like an epic rock star moment for me. I'm like,
Yeah,
Toronto
wow.
is amazing. Like, like just, I really loved it.
Right.
And I still have a lot of fondness for that music. And actually, I love the way that they're just so utterly Canadian and
Totally.
so utterly indie. And so,
I love it.
That part's great.
Yeah.
But I'm like, listening to all of it. I'm like, it's not as much to my taste now, but I'm still very fond of it. I'm like, it's quality. But then, I went through university and had all those influences of like academic music. And then I played jazz too in university. And then I was in a band out of university that was like sort of influenced by like 70s Joni Mitchell and Bill Frisell and stuff. And it was like flute and cello and jazzy guitar. And I met amazing people that I've known for the rest of my life as musicians. And it wasn't like bad in any way, but then like that was a certain kind of approach to music making. And then I was in the hidden cameras, like laying down like 4 on the floor, like for years, all over the place. And the music was amazing, but it was less about accomplishing, complex musical things. Beautiful music,
But
well
just
done. Feeling and also like political and concept and art concepts, and like it was very intelligent, like very smart. It just like the music was more primitive in many ways, and it was on purpose. Like it was purposely put together that way. And like at first, I think there's a documentary that was just made of us a few years back that I'm still gonna see, but there's some footage in it that I saw a bit of ahead of it, and it's like a really early gig when I was in like 2002, and I could tell I was dressed for the. I'm like, oh look, there's Mike. He's just learning how to be cool. It's like hadn't quite caught it yet. But so that kind of changed my taste and my attitude about what actually is good. And now it's sort of like a full circle moment where it's like, okay, I'm gonna go back to not as much jazz, but like especially the classical music that I like grew up with. Take what I want from it, and like even our founders thing was like, I'm going to take the things that I think are sophisticated that I like, but I'm also going to have first and foremost music that's like listenable, like not so obtuse and complex that it like is alienating to anyone. I felt that was something I've always really gone for. And now I'm like starting to like maybe try and up the ante to like maybe push back in the other direction just a little bit and maybe just add a little bit more complexity,
it's an interesting question of what to prioritize. The most connection possible with the most people, which usually means making your music a little, to use a drastic word, more primitive, right? Or if you want to impress your like real trained buddies, then you'll make the more complex stuff. So I feel it's interesting that you are, one, going back to more jazz and classical, and two, that you're wanting to go back slightly more towards just stuff that's more technical and I guess fun for you to play. What it almost makes me think of is I remember, it's not the same genre at all, but it's the same idea. Do you remember the band Them Crooked Vultures, the supergroup? My dad listened to them because I was thinking, hey, it's Dave Grohl, it's Josh Homme, it's John Paul Jones. You like Led Zeppelin, I think you'll like this. And it's a lot more complex than a lot of Led Zeppelin stuff, for example. Like it was very time signature changes and stuff like that. Even, you know what I mean? It just wasn't classic rock.
It was more proggy.
Yeah, it was a little more, exactly. It was more proggy. And my dad and I were talking about it, and we both sort of agreed, like, I bet that's more fun for them to play every night. But it's reaching less people.
For me, it's like, I feel like the complexity can be almost hidden. Like, there's a way to do complexity, and underneath that's almost subversive,
right?
Where
without being show-offy,
fooling people into listening to it. I did actually a podcast called "You, Me, and an Album," and it was like show the podcast guys down in the States. I can't remember his name.
Oh, you were a guest on the podcast.
Yeah, I was a guest on the podcast.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name, but it's called "You, Me, and an Album," and the context is like you're gonna have some delightfully obscure disc and you're gonna tell him about it. A bunch of cool people have been on it, and so I wrote him. I pitched him one. I was like, well, I could do your podcast, but what I want to do is Van Halen 1984. And he's like, well, I know that record. I'm like, not the way I'm gonna tell you about it. And he's like, okay, I'm interested.
Challenge accepted.
And basically, I just argued that it was like kind of a deeply experimental record, seething under the surface.
Wow.
And like after it was done, he was just like, "You're right, you blew my mind." Because it's like it's got all sorts of crazy stuff in it that people just don't notice because it's like smiles, girls in cars, and like
Cock
dumbass
rock.
stuff. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it. But like I've always loved that record because it was just like, oh, this record's just got so much going on, and it's so
What are some of the hits off that one?
like Jump.
Oh, Jump is that was that era. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Not the what's the one that's just a solo?
Oh yeah, not that solo thing. That's from, like,
Explosion or whatever
Eruption
it's called.
or something.
Eruption. Yeah.
I really like that record.
Okay, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So explain to me. Give me some examples of what you said.
Oh, well, I won't go too far into it. But I mean, there's just a lot of like, because that'll be really off the beaten track. What we're
Okay,
talking about.
sure.
But it's like, there's like so much, like you can listen to that podcast actually.
Yeah,
Please.
okay, yeah,
Like,
go listen to the
There's so much
podcast.
harmonic content. There's a lot of like,
Okay.
like the people are just basically being fooled into listening to music that's actually quite challenging harmonically. It has a lot of interesting form things, a lot of like pretty much avant-garde, like things on it that like, especially Eddie Van Halen and his brother were kind of doing, but they were kind of approaching in a way that like Eddie Van Halen's just like this sort of, yeah, I'm not gonna say, you could say savant if you know what I
Okay,
mean.
yes,
because he
yes.
just kind of, I feel like half the time, most of the time, he doesn't even know what he was doing.
It
In
was
fact,
just instinct or like, this sounds good.
yeah. Apparently, he was kind of wasted for the entire
Right,
recording
right,
of the record as
right.
well. So it's like, but he plays like the greatest concert violinist.
Yeah,
Just an
yeah.
incredibly smooth kind of
Huh.
like uber talent. So he just came up with stuff like, oh, this sounds good, but like almost unconsciously, he was just trying to make stuff crazy. And ironically, they made their most commercially successful music. Yeah, right. I mean, even the Jump song, like they go into some crazy time signatures in the middle, and they go to this really strange modulation, which is very prog rock.
Okay,
and
I gotta listen
strange.
to it again because all I remember is the classic just jump part.
C major
Yeah.
thing, and then listen to the bridge runs, and then actually listening, be like, oh wait, and then the solo's completely nuts, and then they're just like 35 seconds later, they're back into the pit, and nobody noticed.
Okay,
you know?
people go listen to that podcast episode.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm going to. This sounds very interesting,
kinda fun.
frankly.
So yeah, that wait, we're off the beaten path.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
We'll get back into it. What were we talking about?
Well, we were kind of still the general idea at hand between us is talking about how your music taste changes, and even just you talking about Van Halen as an example. I feel like
Yeah, I loved Van Halen when I was 12.
right, and now you love them, but in a different way, right?
Yeah, they kind of stuck with me.
Yeah.
Whereas like I listened to a ton of Led Zeppelin and like not really into listening to Led Zeppelin anymore.
I don't really do it anymore. Once in a while, I'll get like a hankering for like No Quarter. Or
Yeah,
something.
yeah, exactly. There once in a while, I'll be like, oh yeah, I want to hear one
Yeah,
of those songs. Just for
exactly.
more nostalgia. It's,
But
Yeah.
yes, that's the other part of your music interest changing. Nostalgia enters the picture and colors everything. As soon as you're like 16, even the music you heard at 12, it's like valorized.
very true.
And it's happened for me, like, and it's happened. I talked to my dad a lot about music, and he's like, these bands that I heard in the 80s when they first came out, like, I didn't even really like them. They were just there. And now when I hear them on the radio, I listen to them like passionately because they remind me so much of the time that I heard them rather than of the music itself.
Yeah, like top 40 pop from the mid 80s does that for me.
Yeah, right. Okay,
It's
there
like,
you go.
I never really liked like whatever Mr. but hearing the Mr. hit, I'm like, oh yeah, I just fucking remember being in Vancouver in 1986, man. It's like, yes, like
I want to hear about Vancouver in 1986. I want to jump.
pretty sweet time to be in Vancouver.
Okay, talk to me about it.
Well, it was just like nice weather, and there's the ocean, and the economy was good, and Expo '86 happened, and we were supposed to be the famous, best place to live in the world. And,
Right.
They hadn't sold all the real estate to people who didn't live there, so
Not
it
everything
wasn't
was
as
just like-
desperately fucked up.
Yeah. Okay.
Well,
wow.
it was because
of course it
crazy
was.
drug problems and all that
Yes.
stuff, but
Yeah.
it was just a nice time to be a kid.
Huh. Wow.
Vancouver's very pretty, and it was just a nice
Oh God,
spot.
it's still very pretty, but it's different.
Yeah,
It's different. You just have to squint in different ways now. You know what I mean?
exactly.
But it's still gorgeous on certain days.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
we'll always have that.
So what was? I want to go back to something that you said near the beginning, actually, which is about the Rheostatics and joining them on stage and the first time that you were like in Toronto or whatever. So how it seemed like you were fairly young.
Yeah, I was going to university, so
You were in university, as in going to university, or you mean
no,
heading off to?
I'd done a couple years of college in Vancouver, and then I was like, I'm gonna get that. I actually was principal cello of the Kamloops Symphony for a year. I'm like, I gotta get the hell out of BC now because that was not good for me.
No?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I wanted to split town, and I figured out I could get. I got into U of T, so I was like, okay, I never thought about going to Toronto. I'm like, I guess that's a place to go. And I was living in a haze then, so I decided I'm just gonna go. But the year leading up to it, I'd been sort of more interested in Canadian music.
Mm-hmm.
Listened to like Big Sugar, Rheostatics,
Yep.
Local Phase, or like Grapes of Wrath, and
Mm-hmm.
I would. Another thing about Vancouver back then in the early '90s, you could actually go to shows and clubs. There was lots of shows. There was a music scene, you know. Like,
yeah.
So I went and saw stuff, and I saw the Rheostatics at the Commodore Ballroom. And was like, damn, like these guys were like kind of into the prog rock I was listening to at the time, but they were more Canadian. So I was like, this is great. And I saw them play the Vancouver Art Gallery for their Group of Seven thing in late August or early August, like a month before I moved for school.
Wow.
And I came up to Don Kerr afterwards because he was playing cello.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, okay, don't take this the wrong way, but you're doing this thing with your bow arm. I could give you one lesson. You could play way better. And it's like, so I was just like, gotta try. I said it in a nice way.
But doesn't that still take like kind of a lot of balls?
Yeah, I don't know. I had more balls back then. Just had a little bit of.
Damn.
There was a certain kind of focus I had from the desperation of needing to get the hell out of there.
Oh, that's real. Yeah.
It's real.
Wow. Okay.
And Don like sort of looked at me, was like, yeah, okay, and it was kind of awkward, but it learned later that he's just like that about everything almost. But at the time, so I was like, oh man, I really blew it with that guy. Whatever.
Yeah. Right.
But then I had given him like a landline number for my dorm, which I somehow had. And he called me like 4 months later. It's like, yeah, I'll take that cello lesson. I'm like, yeah.
That's hilarious. Wow.
So after hanging out with him for a bit, they were doing their Greens Post Music Week, and then I was attending like every show. And he's like, "Do you want to come up and jam on the Sunday?" I was like, "Yes." So
that's so cool.
Got myself a pickup, and I'd never played cello on a stage like through an amplified system.
Wow.
And I learned.
So what was that like? Because it's like.
Oh, I couldn't hear a note.
No, well, that, and I assume also it is a different thing. Even I don't play cello, but playing guitar through an amplifier on a stage, it's not like you hold it differently or play it differently, but you listen to it differently because of the.
It's a completely different listening.
Stuff.
Yeah. It's like cellists are used to feeling. You know those headphones that hook up to your bone in your head. You know, they're the contact.
Oh, yeah.
You need to actually put them in your ears. They're
Oh,
bone
what?
transmission headphones. They clamp to the back of your skull behind your ears, and then they transmit into your ear through that.
Are you saying they actually insert it into your body?
No. It's a.
Oh.
I can't remember what they're called. They're contact.
Oh, okay.
They basically resonate through the bone in your head. You don't put them in your ears. You can wear earplugs.
Right.
And listen to music.
And they are able to resonate in a way that still is a good audio quality.
So cellists actually get a lot of the cello thing through their body.
Oh.
And then they also are used to the sound coming acoustically at a certain range of frequencies, like right in front of their face. And they're so used to that. So if the vibration from everywhere is so high that like it's just a sea of vibration, you can't feel any distinction at all.
Oh.
And the sound is coming from this box over there that's very directional and very colored.
Yeah.
You might not even have the reference of few frequencies that you need to actually find what the fuck pitch you're even playing.
Right.
Then it's more than disconcerting. It's like you are playing like completely blind sometimes. Wow. And the skills that you need to like train yourself to play with monitors and then advocate for yourself and know enough about how to even set monitors a certain way and even be acoustically in the right place.
Yeah.
And cellists are particularly at a disadvantage, I discovered over the years, because obviously I've been on a lot of stages with a lot of cellos in a lot of different sound situations.
Mm-hmm.
And I quickly discovered in that first band at a university that was there is like a wash of like amp and bass amp and monitor mid-range that's just floating around everyone at about stomach level.
Yeah.
And your head's right in it because you're sitting down.
Yeah. Oh,
So
right.
I'm getting all this like haze of like guitarists who can't hear their sound, but
Oh,
it's blazing
God.
at my head.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, the cello is this in-between range between, bless you,
Thank you.
bass and guitar that's like, it's between those ranges. So it's like kind of already nothing's really tuned up to hear it.
Oh,
And then all the gear that's made is either for bass or guitar. It just isn't voiced for you.
that's what I was gonna say. Basically, that's what I assumed is like even the worst sounding system. They've dealt with guitars before or voices, but cellos maybe not. Right? I feel like for some reason it reminds me of food. It's like you could go to any old bar and probably order fries or a burger, and they wouldn't screw it up that badly because they've been asked to do it 1,000 times. But if you happen to order like the one thing on the menu that they say they technically have but make once a year, you're taking a real chance on them being able to handle that. And it seems like that's what the case is with cellists
Yeah.
touring through. So what are some examples of you said before we started that you definitely have a lot of stories about.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's some of those things are like I mean, there's lots of little technical things, and like, I've really tried to like, as far as the standard, it's always been a constant struggle to find things that will work, that allow me to be more creative, and that will also like allow me to hear correctly.
So is that a lot of trial and error with gear, your own gear?
Yeah, a lot of that kind of stuff, and then just a lot of experience, like many shows and many different venues and many different ideas of how to do things, and just kind of knowing how things are. And technology is like caught up. Also,
Right.
cellos are not so strange on stage 25 years
Definitely,
later.
right. Definitely.
And technology is amazing now, but still, I still have issues with like trying to find even, signal processing stuff that like really works great for me. Whereas with violin, it's no sweat. It's a guitar.
Oh, wow.
Whereas cello, it's like, it's not always right.
Well, if there are any cellists listening right now, is there any gear you want to shout out in
Just
an
learn how to
unofficial
use-
endorsement?
Just learn how to use a lot of EQ. I've got nothing but EQ. Like
Do
I've
you have
got
a
an
pedal
EQ.
or a board or what?
Currently have a board with
Okay.
components. Someday I might be switching to some epic rack. I can see the day coming. And we've
Yeah.
been talking about it with some friends lately, but
And now we've got it on record.
yeah. But for now, it's just high quality components. But I mean, like I have an EQ that the cello goes into, and then there's an EQ, there's a processor, and then there's another stereo EQ behind that EQ, and there's another thing. It's like,
And then when
just-
you're playing live, the sound person's also EQing
yeah,
and doing things. Yeah.
all that stuff. So it's
Yeah.
like I'm really trying to like tailor make as many tools that you can are more open based for like studio. So they're supposed to record everything and like make sound for everything.
Right.
More of those kind of tools will take you farther because nobody makes cello gear. Like maybe I'll make cello gear.
You should.
someday.
There's clearly a niche. You've discovered a lack of something.
I mean, if there was just scads of cello players everywhere, I would do it. But so far, I'm just probably going to be making more for me.
Yeah,
now there's
right.
more, but also there's a little research and development need. So if any angel investors out there, just let me know.
Okay.
I want to make an electric cello and I want to make gear for the cello. We can do it. Come on.
Angel
Call me,
investor,
give me a
I
call.
don't know, but I do know someone who would be into helping you with that. Have you ever met Jason Pilling? Do you know who that is?
I do. Maybe.
He's a multi-instrumentalist, plays in bands around town, but on his Instagram and at his house, he has a studio where he builds guitars, he builds bass, he builds all these different instruments, literally in the way that you're describing, where he goes, "Oh, I really want this thing. I checked online. It doesn't exist. Guess I should make it myself."
Cool.
Yeah. So maybe I'll try and put you guys in touch or something, even just to talk about it. But
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of interested in the idea of 3D printing instruments. There's a guy 3D printing fiddles, Open FPX. He goes by on Insta. It's cool, like, and they're acoustic and they're
so they
crazy
actually
looking.
work.
Yeah, you can. It works. Well, I already chatted to him, and he's like, "Yeah, the material so far isn't strong enough to hold the tension of a cello."
Oh.
But then I was just reading an article about race cars, and they're 3D printing metal for race cars. So I think that tech's going to be around at some point.
Yeah. Or in the next 2 years, 3 years.
Yeah. So I'm just sort of like, I think it's like printed aluminum. It's pretty nuts stuff. I
Okay.
don't even know how it works.
No,
but
I have no idea how
yeah,
it works. It's magic to me.
So I read those kind of articles sometimes. I'm interested in like, open wild tech things that will help me maybe just sort of make the playing field level. And it's like, no, I just want this thing that I'm imagining, like make it so kind of, and that's getting closer and cheaper because the printing thing just takes the, luthier, you pay $10,000 to work for 2 years, and the thing like, oh, it kind of works. It's like, no, let's just print it in an hour or two and see if it works.
Yeah, true. Luthiers, yeah. What's gonna happen to them?
Well, there's no one's gonna replace wood instruments. I mean,
yeah, I guess they'll always be around in addition to whatever new technology is there.
Yeah, making a fully graphite cello is awesome, and it sounds great, but it doesn't sound like a wood cello. It hasn't hurt sales of wood cellos. So just like now we have a fucking cello you can play outside in the rain.
Yeah, right. Wow, damn,
it's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
so, and they actually have their own sound that's like not the same as a wood cello at all. And
I would assume
it has its own merit. In fact, really cool.
Out of curiosity, what does that sound like? What's the difference? Because we know vaguely what an acoustic cello sounds like. So what is
the one that I played the most is the Lewis and Clark, which is the original one. It's like a handmade one. Yeah, exactly. And it's just a boomier sound, like really loud and boomy. And then it's like, because the fingerboard is made of graphite composite and not wood, it's like very snappy, and like the top end is really wide open. Like if you go up and play louder and louder, the wood doesn't choke. It's not wood because it just keeps. It's very resonant.
Yes,
it's very boomy and resonant, and like lots of top end, and so it's like kind of like if you took an EQ and turned up all the top end and all the bottom end.
Right.
So it's kind of scooped sounding.
Yeah.
Which makes it kind of awesome for playing like modern 20th century music.
Yeah, that's exactly what you need. The scoop is classic, the mid scoop.
Like my old cello teacher at U of T, Shauna Ralston, I told her about it because I worked at Lon McQuaid at the time. And then she went in and got one and loved it and played so much contemporary Canadian music on it because she's a huge, I think she had at one point the record for most Canadian compositions commissioned by one person. Like she's really a big supporter of that stuff.
Wow.
But yeah, I watched her play like the Schnittke sonata on it. And I was like, that thing is way better than a wood cello for this. Just loud and scrubby.
Interesting. Yeah. No,
so
that's cool to hear about that technology is changing in that way. When you think of such these instruments seems like hundreds of years old, and they feel like they haven't really changed at all. Obviously they have in minor ways, but
yeah, suddenly it's accelerated.
Yes, exactly. Like everything else, it's accelerated. So where do you want to go here with the podcast? Like,
well, we may well get back to the subject of something close to what your podcast about.
About worst song.
Yeah, I don't mind digressions, but I feel like it's some people probably tuned out. Sorry.
Maybe. Well, whatever. I like digressions. Yeah. Otherwise, if I only wanted the answers to those exact questions, this would be like a half an hour podcast.
You're right. It'd be pretty short.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I guess maybe I'll just. We don't have to get. The funny thing is, like, the actual questions might not take that long, but
no, they sometimes don't.
As far as the own worst song, it just made me think about the idea of I said before. How, like, for instance, that first record I put out, I mean, full disclosure, I was slowly writing songs and these alternate guitar tunings, and I would just wait, and then I would just do this one take of one song that I kind of wrote, and it was oh, I just got a good take, and I keep that, and then I mix a little bit more on it 3 months later, and then I write a little bit of this one, and I have a good take, and I keep that take too, and then get going along. So, enter 7 years, 6.5, 7 years later, it's kind of finally done, and I put it out. So it's very gone over,
Yes.
It's mixed by this mixer who's way better than me, and it sounds perfect and everything. I'm like, okay, there's that. And that's 6, 7 songs.
Wow.
And then I mean, there's another Our Founders record that's actually in the can. It's 7 years later again.
Jeez.
In fact, I think we're gonna retire the band before I even have a chance to
Yeah,
put it out.
what a schedule.
Yeah, it's just the nature of that particular project.
Okay.
But a little later, not that much comes out for me, and then I start this solo cello act and get out some, new material, which mostly was kind of jammed out with people, and then I just kind of wrote stuff around it, and then it sort of became something, and then Hand Drawn said, we want to sign this record. I was like, oh, it's a thing, and that kind of inspired me to do it. And then the second record was a much more I'm going to write songs that I've been playing live. And
Right.
Make a record of tuneful tunes.
And you referenced the label. It's Hand Drawn Dracula.
Yes.
So how did you even get in touch with them, or did they get in touch with you? And they were like, we've heard the rumblings of this record.
It's a funny story because I had a friend who said, play cello on my record, and I will send your. I kind of put together this thing. I think this is a dark sort of ambient record. It'd be nice to see if I could maybe get someone to sign it. And so he's a absolute like he just is such a taste maker music guy.
Okay.
He's like, I know all the like his music organized in his collection by label and stuff. So he's
Oh
like,
wow, one of those
sought
guys.
out like 40 labels and sent really personal emails to everybody. Like
he
really
did this on
reference.
behalf of you.
Yeah, I also
Wow.
did free cello
Yeah,
work for his record.
Oh yeah,
so
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
a barter
okay.
thing, right?
Sure.
So I was like, this is good. So he used his expertise to really connect with like a bunch of labels. Like, oh, like all these, I've been a fan of all these bands on your label, and like this music is like this. He really matched it up.
Wow.
He got some good responses, though no one really went for it. But one of the first labels that he sent it to was James at Hand Drawn Dracula, because he sort of was on the label and was supposed to be delivering a record, which he actually had been taking forever on. But then James, I don't think ever really listened to it at all. He didn't notice that part of the email because he was too concerned with like the record that was late.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
So enter like 3-4 months later, no really significant bites that I think would be good. Like, yes, we could maybe release it in 3 years, kind of stuff. I'm like, all right, it doesn't sound that good. I might just have to put it up myself.
Yeah.
And I ended up going to a really low-key birthday party for a friend of mine that had 4 people at it, including James Mejia, who I actually knew. I'd known like casually for like
Is that a
decade.
party? 5 people?
When it's like one crazy Danish guy and a couple,
Yeah.
It's like James, the dudes from Holy Fuck Me, and you
Right.
know.
The people make the party,
And
not
actually,
the population.
It was actually at Loveless, and I remember Dusty from Slash Need was behind the bar too. So basically, it was just a very good group of 6
Okay.
people,
Okay.
including the staff.
Yes.
Nice.
Nice.
So
Yeah.
we just sat down, and James Mejia, if you know him, I don't know. I've always said it's a mystery how he's managed such success in the industry, speaking so quietly. Because if you're in a loud room at all, you cannot hear a word he says.
Yeah.
And I love this about him. But
Yeah.
so people,
It's sometimes that has a quality that draws people in.
it does.
Okay. Yeah.
So because it was such a quiet room, we sat down and I was just talking. I was like, oh, yeah, I'm doing this record. I didn't even know he'd been sent the record. I was like, oh, I just did this thing. I'm going to try and put it out. And he's like, oh, it sounds like something I'd really like. It's like, oh, yeah. It's like, well, I'll send it to you. It's whatever. It's like, figured that's nothing's going to come of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a couple days later, he just called me back. He's like, don't sign with anyone else. I want to put this out. I was
Whoa.
like, oh, really? So I was like, well,
What did that
you're
feel
welcome. Yes, you can have it.
like? What did that feel like to have such a vote of confidence?
It was a really great moment because
Yeah.
I had no confidence.
Oh, yeah.
Enter late ADHD,
Right.
like it just had already been burned into me that it was just things were not going to work out very well for me, because I've been siding with people, but it just keeps coming to some fun things I did, but like they come to an end,
So because you had this, you were used to this pattern of siding.
Yeah, it's just like you do these things where.
Are you okay? What do you need?
Oh, I'm just going to turn off my phone.
Oh, sure.
Stop the dinging.
I didn't realize that was you. I thought it was the people upstairs.
No, that's why I was going to stop it.
No, it's okay. It creates ambiance.
Yeah, it's just like you play with a bunch of cool people, and then especially if you're a side person, and then the gig comes to an end, and then oh, there's no back end for me. Oh, I don't have any right credit. Oh, I'm just sort of like back to my day job,
Right.
and
left with connections at best, sort of thing, and a nice night.
Exactly. So, and I never was very good at advocating to actually get paid well for myself. So was not very business minded in many ways. And it kind of the same thing happened with my production career, where I just worked with a lot of really great artists who didn't have very much money, artistically very high bar, but tended to be stuff that like was just too off the beaten track to ever really get popular.
Yeah.
And I'm the kind of producer who doesn't really have a signature sound. I just really try and make something as good as it can be. And it's really like, it turned out to be an asset later on with film mixing, because that's actually what you want to do.
Right.
So instead of being obsessed with the greatest snare sound that was my thing, it was like, I'm going to make the craziest record for these people, and then the next one will sound completely different.
Right. No, and that's its own...
it is.
Not its own sound, but it's its own signature almost.
Yeah. But I was doing all this stuff, people were like, oh yeah, he plays cello in bands, but meanwhile I'm doing like, 4 different jobs, but no one knows I'm doing it.
But that's also just an identity thing, and how, the perception of you versus how you see you, right? Like, I was just going to say in response to this, my perception of you at the very least now is you seem successful, whatever that word looks like to different people. You play in a lot of great bands, like featured on cello, and you've also now, you're doing your own record, and that's got a lot of love. So how do you feel now? How have you found yourself here?
Now it's more like trying to deal with the fact that as I've participated in the music industry, it is like
Deteriorating before your
collapsed.
eyes? Yeah.
And, my efforts to make more money have been like equally and overtaken by the less availability of money. So it's sort of like, yeah, in some ways,
As your career is cresting, it's at the worst time in the
literally and
environment.
legally made less money
Yeah.
than I have almost ever right now.
Oh my God.
Which is just the way it is, and there's the other factors of you become like middle-aged and you're like, okay, I might actually have some genuine concerns here. Because it's like, yeah, you don't have any like, I'm like, I have sort of a similar lifestyle in a way to like, someone in their early 20s almost, because,
Elaborate.
You end up like, well, you just end up 30 years into a career. It's like, oh yeah, I don't have a car, any property, any savings really per se. Those kinds of things. Like, oh shit, yeah, that stuff. And maybe you don't need it, and that's fine.
Well,
but
that's sort of what I want to know. Okay, so you're sort of saying these things bluntly, but you're not saying how you feel about them. How
Yeah.
do you feel about it?
Well, I mean, that was 2024. A lot of it was dealing with those feelings, to be honest.
Okay.
So like, yeah, just kind of dealing with, some of the real difficulties, and also just that sort of feeling that, like, in general, Canadian and North American society is just telling you that you're very irresponsible for doing what you're doing, and you really are dumb.
As in pursuing arts into
like,
into
what are you
middle
even
age?
doing, man? Like, you're just, those kinds of feelings sneak into it, and you have a lot of self-doubt.
Yeah.
But I went through a time with that more, and now I have a little bit more of a realistic thing of like, no, like, this is the life I chose.
Mhm.
It is its own reward.
Mhm.
I am really trying to cook up ways to, obviously make some money, but it's not still like I'm still just really all in on art.
Right.
And one thing that has come around is like not being commercial for this long has actually turned out to be an asset.
In what
Because now it's like, in some ways, like, things have just, everything that's commercial art has collapsed unless you're like absolutely the top of the mainstream.
Or
in
lasts
such a
for
way.
15 minutes. It collapses
Yeah.
or it lasts for 15 minutes. Yeah.
That now, like, the only thing that might have any sustainability is actually uniqueness.
Yes.
So 30 years of trying to do as much, as cool as I could figure out and as different things just makes me very flexible and makes me more apt to, like, make something that's not like anyone else, which is never going to be overtaken by AI. It's like, I'm not
Yeah.
worried about AI. Like, it's going to write commercials and jingles, but
Right.
I'll be long dead before it figures out what I'm doing.
Yeah, and also just briefly about AI, I think that actually is what's going to happen is there's going to be an AI version of things, and then there's going to be a premium you pay for human-made versions of things, and that's probably what it's going to be.
So really my good thing
Yeah.
now is that I do have something that's like, I feel finally like nailed something where I'm like, okay, no one else is doing this. And it is uniquely mine.
And that's satisfying enough for you to be less worried than you were last year when you were in the throes of, thinking about these things.
Well, it's still a little worrisome, but it's not like I'm not crushing myself over it. It's like, yeah, it's more like, okay, like,
This
logistically,
is where I am.
yeah, this is like, worrisome, and of course the world is worrisome, but
Yeah.
it's not me like maybe feeling like I wasted my life. It's more just like, oh, this is a shit situation, but then you can get over it because you're like, well, think of something.
Yeah, I guess if I imagine, because I think about the same things and like what I'm pursuing, how I'm pursuing it. For a long time, in addition to playing music, I was working like a classic kind of desk job, office job, right?
Mhm.
And no offense to the people who worked there, those people were fine, but just the job itself, it was just like soul crushing in a way that making less money but pursuing arts isn't. And
Yeah.
is that sort of where you arrived?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would have been handy if I just done some sort of a job
To
where
have
I
a
could maybe
savings?
Yeah, something
Yeah.
to back up. Yeah, because never having made any money, like, kind of in a sense, nothing,
Yes.
but like very little compared to what maybe even people thought I had made, is sort of like, ugh. But Also, like, fuck it. The nice thing about that too is like now, like everybody's not making very much money, but
Yes.
I'm really used to it. So I'm like,
Yes.
yeah, whatever. It's the same as usual.
I actually kind of think, yeah, and now because of how crappy everything is, this gig multi-artistic lifestyle is actually it's becoming more common and therefore weirdly more accepted the worse things get. I feel like I've seen it kind of now. Even boomers will be like, yeah, I get it, people have to have like 4 different jobs and maybe 3 of them are artistic, or 1 of them is artistic and 3 is something else. And but it's just yeah, it's weird how the shittier things got, the more I think that arts didn't get better, but the our outlook as a society at what artists are doing to make a living seems more real now.
A little bit more.
Am I right
Yeah.
about that at all?
I mean,
you,
I think
you push back if you disagree.
I feel like that. Like, yeah, it's hard to say.
Sure,
I mean,
of course.
Because the arts are, well, let's face it, there's a huge upswing of like right wing
Yes.
fascism everywhere,
Which is almost every time anti-arts, as in addition
it's
to everything
anti-arts.
else.
The kind of stuff that I do is so opposed to anything that's even vaguely like it is like ultimately very not against. It's against all of that, just by existing, right?
Yeah.
And it's always been that way. So we'll see. But there is obviously some kind of a appetite for something. I'm just kind of looking for a break now because I feel like, okay, I'm ready to roll. I finally got confidence. I finally have some stuff to really put out there. I got skills. I'm just looking for the thing that's gonna help me
it's interesting.
break through.
Well, and so maybe this is another interesting point that to me, before having this longer conversation, just seeing you, this is the nature of Instagram as well as just perception, right? An image. I assumed you were currently enjoying the break that you say you're still wishing for. Like it seemed like you were in this break and you're playing with these cool artists, and yeah, maybe it's not you leading the stuff, but you're playing with other cool bands, and that must be providing a decent enough.
Yeah, I'm nothing
living.
against with other bands.
No. Yeah.
As far as like how much they pay me, like, of course.
No.
I'm talking about like more sustainable.
Yeah.
A real career worth of income that's sustainable and like keeps moving along, and like someone who's like a leader in their field and maybe has worked in it for 30 years and
Yes,
it's crazy expensive and has a huge bio and a huge resume.
Yeah.
Like in any other industry would be just
Yeah, you're right.
really secure.
Highly sought after and secure. Yeah.
Whereas like I'm just still struggling with that, and a lot of it did to myself because I did not really put myself out there. So that's fine. I'm not
right, there's
trying,
no tenure in arts.
Yeah, and not really. I mean, exactly. I'm not really so much like looking for sympathy. In fact, I'd rather not. It's more just like, yeah, the reality is I'm still into it. I still love it. Don't feel like I could ever quit. I feel like I almost don't have a choice.
I was going to ask about that. Like,
I'm compelled to keep going.
You are compelled to keep going, not only because you like it and have this artistic compulsion in yourself, but also because presumably the longer you go in one industry, that's the nature of anything, you don't have skills in other stuff.
I think I have transferable skills in so many things.
Yeah.
But I'm now used to such a huge variety of interesting things to do every single day. And so many interesting problems and so many. My job, quote unquote, is so complex that every single day there's like a long list of all kinds of things that I could be doing, and they span everything from looking at legal contracts to like booking trips, like hypothesizing about new inventions, entrepreneurial gestures, technical things, building computers.
This is Da Vinci shit.
Yeah, just everything. Like, there's so much you can do in the context of all this. Never mind just like finding new philosophical concepts and things to read about, to maybe like interacting with other artists and different art disciplines, and just trying to put together larger scale projects and collaborating, and it's just, and then there's all the personal things that come from that, and that's just my own music. Then there's also like, I'm gonna produce records for other people, or engineer this thing, or
so you're wearing many
do
hats.
a voiceover gig or something, and like maybe even a little acting. It's like there's just there's just so much stuff to do. You put me on a desk, it'd be nice to get paid, but also I don't know if I could really handle it
that
now.
Exactly.
I'm just used to being so
creative and going in all these different directions, and it sounds like enjoying the fact that you have multiple plates to spin.
Yeah, that's why I'm not going to look for sympathy because I've definitely enjoyed my life.
Yeah,
Like, there's
yeah.
lots of stuff that's been fantastic, and the people I know, oh my god, like I know so many amazing
Exactly.
people in
And also,
Toronto and everywhere.
The thing too I wanted to say, and this is easy to say when you're secure with money more than when you're insecure with money or whatever, but the thing I keep coming back to as well is you can't take it with you. I know
No.
you can leave it to your kids if you have kids or whatever, but depending on your life, yeah, you can't take it with you. So
Yeah,
it
I
should
agree.
be serving your life. It shouldn't be the
I
opposite.
don't need that much.
No.
Just sometimes, like lately, it's been like, oh, if I could just have a little bit more of it, I could do more stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not here to. Yeah.
I want to get on.
I'm
I
not
want to
s-
get on tour, and it's like, I kind of just need some bread to do that.
Exactly.
You know?
I'm not suggesting
Yeah.
being like scant, not able to afford anything is good, but I'm just saying, you know,
Yeah, it's fine.
if
I
you only
mean-
have enough to pursue what you want to do in the arts, then that's not so bad.
Yeah, and I'm not a big fan of money in general, so it's like obviously this is why I'm
It's a
having
means
this
to an
problem
end.
now.
Yes. Yeah. Exactly.
This is if I'd maybe been a little bit more interested in it, I'd probably be better off. But that's fine. It is what it is, and the good thing is that I'm less down on myself, and it's more just utilitarian. Like I got to figure out how to make the world work now.
Yeah.
And still be able to do what I want to do for the rest of my life and what I've done for my whole life. It's like that's just what I want to do. You know.
Do you have any advice if you would, go back and tell yourself something
Oh.
other than the fact that develop, say, a cushion?
Yeah, maybe just like first thing would just be like get on ADHD meds. By the way, you have this, and you're not the person you think you are.
Yeah. Right.
You're someone different.
Right.
And
Wow.
and you, well, I think I am that person. I'm like, no, you don't. You think you're this. And you're like, well, I guess you're right. I'm like, yeah. Like, just give myself some confidence would have been a good start. And other things could have come out of that.
Yeah.
But, there's also a flip side of that is that, like, probably maybe a lot less of an asshole over the years. Because it's like, there is something to be said for the other side of it, which is like, it's generally been very nice.
Yeah,
It seems to be the
that's
report
true.
coming from most people is like, I haven't made a lot of enemies.
That's true.
So
Good.
And
No, you made a lot of friends and not a lot of enemies, it sounds like.
and also going back to the actual subject of the podcast, it's like the benefit of that is that I didn't do a lot of fake it till you make it because I never thought confident in that. So when I put out a song, like I've done the research, I've worked hard, I've put
Right.
it all together. It's like I really have to
You don't
get
feel
good
like
at
you're faking it.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really had to feel like so qualified,
Right.
overqualified to
Okay.
do anything. So it's like, it's just the path you take in your life, and that's just how he ended up. And I probably wouldn't be making the music I make now if I'd gone on a different path.
No, probably
you know?
not. But that's
because it comes out of the place that you are in your life. and
totally.
I like the music I'm making now, so
It's
it's
nature
exciting.
and nurture,
Yeah, and
just like you.
It's all about the next thing. It's like just an illusion that you could go back, and an illusion that there's even anything to regret. It's like that's just the past, and it's like not even a concept that even works. I mean, that sounds like very woo-woo, but it's also a very handy concept for nowadays. It's like, no, there's now.
Yes, there's now only really.
Yeah, and
This
there's like
passing moment.
trying to figure out stuff for the future.
For
That's
sure.
not unwise, but like you also can't tell what the fuck's gonna happen. So you
Yeah,
might as well
it's
just,
a little bit like don't go blind into the future and don't never analyze the past, but let either drag you down. Kind of just try.
exactly. And
Yeah.
we're not going to make that into one of these podcasts.
No.
But yeah, so my nature of or rather the nature of like how songwriting has worked for me
Yeah.
is like I have been very careful and very exacting, and now I feel like I can, because I have more confidence and I have sort of a practice, if you will, and also a lot more of an intellectual practice in that I can explain why I do things.
Yes.
And write you a short paper about it, perhaps.
Yeah.
Then I feel like, through that I can like then have my next place to go be places where I'm like, they're kind of like environmental bits of ideas that come to me through different arts and personal experiences where I'm like, this and this and this could work. And then sometimes concepts, and then this sort of rolling that into like what I know about me as a musician, what my limitations are, what my positive things are, and what I can do with the sort of somewhat encyclopedic gear knowledge I have now.
Yeah.
To just say like, that could be done this way, that could be done this way, and so because a lot of it is sound, and it's just interesting. So there's now a great wealth of things to do, and I'm maybe a little less precious about it because I can be like, oh, I'll just try some shit and I think it'll be good.
Yeah.
And so I think I'll be able to do stuff a lot quicker. And
Because you have that foundation of confidence mixed with honing your skills over years.
Yeah. Now it's just like the 30 years of futzing around has come tell, and I'm like, okay, actually I am good at a bunch of stuff.
Right.
And then like
good.
I've done lots of shit. So it's like
good.
Now it's like I could actually just finally give myself a break. I'm like, just sit down and do it.
Yeah.
And that is exciting.
Cool.
And it's also frankly exciting to be this old and just feel like I'm creatively just like 25.
Totally. Yeah.
And
yeah.
I'm like, okay, well, I feel like I'm getting back to the things I meant to do at 25, and I'm finally doing it now. So that's kind of cool.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So
Okay.
as far as that goes, I mean, I'm probably going to be less precious about it. Maybe I'll put out something that's bad, but I kind of feel like, probably won't be, at least to me.
At least to you, which is the whole point.
Yeah, I don't think I'll let things go that are terrible because I'll see it.
No, exactly.
And I also know all the pitfalls that fall into people making records because I've made so many records for other people.
Yeah.
And I kind of know even my own psychological pitfalls. So it's just like, if you hate my music in the future, there's no one to blame but me, usually.
Right.
Unless something really calamitous happens.
Yes.
I mean, I had some issues with vinyl pressing that were very frustrating to me.
Oh, really?
Yeah, or with the last couple of releases, because it was just like, I can't control this and I'm pissing me off.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
I know what's what.
Oh, God. That's
so rough. Those things that are out of my control, there's not too many things are like that.
Good.
You can't really blame yourself for that.
No.
It's nothing to do with the actual music anyways.
No, exactly. That's a separate thing.
Yeah.
Well, this takes us into opportunities for stories relevant to the main questions that I ask.
Yeah, you were saying what's my worst gig, right? Or what my best gig and my worst gig?
Yeah, best gig, worst gig are the first two main questions.
Let me think.
And you alluded before the podcast to having a good worst one.
It's quite a good worst one. I guess I'll give the best one as like a couple hallmarks for me.
Okay, sure. Great.
Pretty much any gig I ever played on stage with Arcade Fire in the early days when they were just pushing Funeral. Like we did one show where they were opening for Hidden Cameras for like 4 dates in the States, and then they were just blowing up so hard, and I played with them every night with Owen too, and people were weeping in the front rows. It was just crazy energy with that band at the time.
Owen, you mean Owen Pallett?
Yes, Owen Pallett, and because he was in the cameras as well at that point.
Yeah.
So we got to the Bowery Ballroom was for the last stop. I think it was like 4 gigs. And at that point, we were like, okay, we got to flip the bill. We're opening for you now.
Yeah, right. Wow.
And that decision was made. And I still got to play with them. And then David Bowie and David Byrne came to see them for the first time at the Bowery. And it was just like, okay, this is a good gig.
Yeah, wow, Jesus Christ.
Only small regret is like, I kind of, if I'd had more confidence, perhaps might have been able to go have dinner with David Bowie that night, like the rest of the band. I probably could have said, yeah, I could come too. And they probably would have been like, yeah, sure.
Wow.
And the opportunity missed. But
still in the room with those people.
Yeah, it would be. I just would have liked to fucking hang out with Bowie for a couple of minutes. That'd be sick.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Can't say I regret it. Great show. Second best show was like in the Hidden Cameras. We played Roskilde Festival in 2005.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a little bit Danish. I love Scandinavian stuff.
Yeah.
Roskilde's the big Danish festival.
Yes,
amazing thing.
Yeah.
We played, and we just hit our second record, and we had a bit of a hit in Sweden, and there was like 5,000 mostly Swedes, and they're all singing every lyric.
Wow, that's
and like
cool.
doing our weird dance with their arms.
Yeah.
Like all of them.
That's crazy.
There's a bit of like hazy flip phone footage where you can see the first couple hundred rows on my website.
Yeah.
But it was incredible. It was like a literal sea. It's like watching that Live Aid Queen video of them doing Radio Gaga kind of thing. It was just like, oh my God. And like I remember Joel just stopped singing for a second because the crowd had just sang all the choruses, and he looked at me and was like, what the hell? It's like it's like we were like huge rock stars.
Yeah,
at
wow,
that
that's
moment.
awesome.
And
okay, if I remember, I'm going to add a link to that. So you said it's on your website.
Yeah, you can find it. It's kind of a little obscure YouTube video up there.
Okay, I'll try and find it.
It's in the ancient videos from flip phones section if you're going to look for it.
Okay,
I'll send you
sounds
some.
good. Okay, please do.
But so that was a good moment just because, and I actually, even while still playing the gig, I thought, this probably won't last. I should enjoy this. And it never quite happened quite like that again. So it's like, yeah.
That was
a good
that
moment.
kicked in, that thought kicked in.
Yeah,
and
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, good. And now it's
moment.
coming up on your one of your top 3, so there you go.
And my last top 3, honestly, was October 28th, 2024, 23, sorry.
Okay.
When I put out my second record, did it with Wavelength, and Owen came up and played with me in Alaska B, and we set it up in a crazy wood shop and built a stage and put a giant sheet up and had like a huge surround sound system, and it was incredibly stressful because everything almost broke like right before the show, and a bunch of people came, and it was like amazing. It was just like it ended up working great.
Well,
And
sorry,
shot a movie
did
of
you
it.
say where it was?
Yeah, it was at the Brothers Dressler Furniture Factory on Sterling.
Oh, wow.
It was like a pop-up venue that Wavelength did.
Cool.
And it was just a good full circle moment. And yeah, it was just really satisfying to just play a great show after a couple years of doing this thing. I was like, wow. And headlining a decent show in Toronto that like a bunch of people came to. And it was like, oh, we just did something spectacular kind of, even though we did it on no money, and it was like literally a sheet and a stage, but we managed to pull it off, and that was just deeply satisfying. It's like, okay, I've kind of arrived in a way.
Yeah. No,
and I did something with this. I'm encouraging. I keep going. So in a way, that was like the third best one.
Wow,
and it's great that it just happened.
Those are 3 great times that you've brought the answers thus far.
I've been very fortunate in this life to be at and on stage for a ton of amazing shows. So those are really good for me, but man, there's been so many great shows.
I believe you.
And I actually got to say a lot of them I owe to all the amazing people I played for. So shout out to all those people.
Oh.
Sorry if I complained, but I've been very lucky to just go with Hidden Cameras, with Zune, with Jim Guthrie, toured with like Constantine's. I've toured with like so many amazing bands that are just like
that's awesome,
crazy experiences and wonderful, and usually them paying the tab. So thanks.
And you're thankful. So good. All right.
Okay, so the worst gigs. I mean, I was saying earlier, the worst gigs for my solo stuff are not very interesting. Like, the looper broke, and I was stressed.
Technical, boring stuff.
Yeah, not funny.
Okay.
Not interesting. And I mean, the Hidden Cameras had a few pretty epic shit shows, but it was almost all the gigs.
Yeah. Okay.
In one way or another, something broke.
Yeah.
We're a very ramshackle kind of operation. So they all bleed together as kind of just the general experience. And, you have silly things. Being a side musician will take on anything, especially early on.
Yeah.
I got called for some really strange stuff. And I would just, I'll try that out, every genre.
Yeah.
But this one remains a benchmark for me as far as epic proportion and just plain bananas. Like, just strange and hectic.
I'm very excited.
Okay, so this artist, their name is Jackie Chung. They're like, I don't know where they're standing right at the time. They were kind of like one of the kings of Canto-Pop. So Cantonese legacy artist in China, like back to the late 80s, early 90s, kind of an easy listening thing, but it's had many different periods, if you will, kind of like a Rod Stewart of China.
Okay. I was almost going to suggest Michael Bolton, but like
kind of like that, but like yes, just like that era, but not all croonery. Like some of it's croonery, and then some of it's like Justin Timberlake-ish, just a lot of different genres.
Yep.
I was unaware of them, but very obviously big in China. And a friend of mine, Alex Chung, who I went to U of T with, was like, yo, you want to come to this string quartet gig? It's for this guy, Jackie Chung. He's huge. Like, I'm like, oh, cool. He's like, yeah. It'd just be you and my 2 other pals here, but I thought you could come out and play. Really fun. It's a string quartet. It's got a big show. It's at Ricoh Coliseum. I'm like, oh, cool. He's like, yeah. So, but I'll warn you, you're going to be the only whitey in the whole place. I'm like, okay, cool. I don't feel
whatever. Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
And so then about, I was like a few days before, he's like, okay, I got bad news and good news. I'm like, what's that? He's like, well, they cut the quartet. I'm like, oh, okay. He's like, but they kept the cello. I'm like, oh, well, that doesn't seem so bad. He's like, yeah, okay, well, good luck. They gave me a free ticket, so I'm going to watch. I'm like, great. So that's all the information I got.
Yeah.
So I show up. I was given a time to show up, which is like 4 hours before the show, I guess.
Okay.
Ricoh Coliseum is now called something else. It's the one in the exhibition place.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. It's
They do the roller stuff. They do the rough the
Argos? The
no,
CFL, is that what you're talking
about? Not CFL,
it's
like it's beside the soccer stadium. They do the other the more minor league hockey team, whatever. People,
AHL thing?
yeah,
AHL?
it used to be called Ricoh Coliseum.
Okay.
You drive by it on the Gardner. It's
Okay.
a 10 or 13,000 seat venue.
Okay.
It's big.
Oh, BMO Field. Is that what it is?
No, it's not the field.
Oh, sorry,
it's like,
sorry.
It's a closed stadium.
Oh,
but it's big.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
Like I said. So it's a stadium that holds like more than 10,000 people.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah.
Completely sold out for 2 nights. Like, completely sold out.
Wow.
So I go to this place. I finally find like the weird like hockey dressing room that has the band.
Okay.
And I find it, and of course, there's a large band. I think it's about, I'd say maybe 16 people in the band. It's like a big review. There's a full rhythm section band, and then there's I'll find out later a horn section, like 4 or 5 backup singers, and there's a whole dance troupe.
Damn.
So it's a big band. Of course, nobody speaks any English at all, so they're kind of just looking at me somewhat balefully, and I'm like standing there, okay. And then I also was instructed to bring a tuxedo, which all ex-classical musicians have.
Yeah.
But it's been a long time since I dusted out the tuxedo. I'm like,
okay,
so this is the vibe. No one else in the band was wearing tuxedos. But I was like, okay, well, they want the quartet to have the classical look. Like, whatever. So
Quartet that is now just one person.
now the quartet is just cello. And I am aware of... I know lots of Asian cultures in China and stuff, and they love classical instruments, and they really are very fond of cello.
Okay.
So I'm like, okay, this tracks. So there's going to be some cello stuff. Anyways, I think half an hour goes by. I still don't know what's going on. Finally, a guy comes in who looks like he might know something, and I'm like, hi, I think someone said something along the lines of like, music director. Like these kinds of large touring bands always have like a music director, like band leader,
right?
Who
a coach, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, and they're the person kind of organizes the band, rehearses the band. It's kind of in charge of the on-stage operation. I'm like, hi, like by chance do you like speak English? I understand you might be the music director. And the guy was just like, oh yeah, man, I'm from like California. I'm like, oh, thank God.
Okay, that's hilarious.
What's going on here? He's like, okay, well, you got the charts, right? I'm like, no, I didn't get the charts. He's like, okay. So he walks out, and then he comes back with, do people remember phone books? Remember what the phone book looked like?
Of course.
Well, yeah.
Big yellow. Wow.
Like, it's like a ring-binded thing of like, I don't know, 200 pages, maybe 150 pages. And I'm like, whoa, what's this? He's like, no, we're not playing all of it. I'm like, oh, God, how long is the show? He's like, well, the show is like 4.5 hours. I'm like,
damn.
Oh, that's a long show.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah. It's like, it's quite an extensive show. We're going to play stuff from this binder. I'm like, okay. And there's a full, like, chopped down version of a full musical in the middle of it, like a medley of musical that also has acting in it. And it's about 45 minutes and in the middle of the set.
Damn.
I'm like, okay. He's like, I suggest you look at part of the musical, and he gets me some pages to look at. I'm like, okay. So I'm sitting in the hockey, dressing room, and I'm looking through this stuff. And a lot of it's actually, I'm like, oh, this is like,
you can do
fairly, yeah, but it's pretty epic orchestral stuff. Lots of pages of. I'm like, okay, so I'm like shedding on this stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'll hopefully be able to get it right. I'm practicing pretty hard. And then we get to the part where I figure out that how it works. Basically, they give you a monitor system on stage, and there's an intercom because the music director is like 300 feet away. Like he's really down there on several risers down on the other side of the stage. I can just sort of see him out of the corner of my eye. And so he comes on, and they send you set lists, numbers. And you flip through, and randomly there's numbers like A24, like B67, and all these
start
things.
in a specific measure, or
a specific measure and in a specific song.
Yeah.
And then there's some translation things I was noticing where I was sort of like, they had a sort of a set list set out that was perspective, and like, okay, so this song is called "My Heart Is Cut." My heart is cut. Okay, and then finally I'm like, I remember in the show, I'm like flipping through, I'm like, oh, cut my heart. That's probably it. It's like, it's like jumping in and like, okay, this. So there's a little bit of that translation going on.
Yeah.
But mainly it's like, there'll be a change, and then suddenly you'll hear like, we're going to change something different. You're like, it's like, okay. It's like, okay, we're going to go to 48B, 48B. And like, it's like, okay, 48B. 1, 2, 3. It's like, boop, boop,
Oh,
boop, boop,
man.
play. It's like, okay, get to the page,
Jeez.
get the bow down. It's like, okay, and then sight reading. And it's sort of
Wow.
like, so there's a bit of that going on.
Yeah.
But it's like still organized well enough that I'm like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
I can handle this.
Mm-hmm.
And then, funnily enough, when I get to the actual sound check, it turns out the entire horn section, which was just out eating, is from like Perth, Australia. So a bunch of white Australian dudes. So
Yeah,
I'm like
wow.
talking to these guys. I'm like, yeah, we're just on tour with these guys. I'm like, oh, it's fun. Big band.
Yeah.
I'm out there on stage, and a nice moment was the sound check. I finally get plugged in. I have a pickup on my acoustic cello, but also like there's a mic on there, and they're still building the stage. It's 30 minutes to showtime, and there's guys with hammers and like
Jeez.
drilling things in and like putting rivets and stuff. It's just like, or like screwing things together like frantically.
Damn. Okay.
And the sound guy, front of house, obviously he's used to chaos. He
Yeah.
was very calm and very nice. He's like, I plug in here and stuff, and he pulls it up, and I have to admit there was a good moment because I was like, he's like, okay, you play something. So I play a note, and I was like, whoa, because it's cranked.
Oh, right.
And it is an empty 10,000 seat stadium, and it is just hitting the back wall
Yeah.
like so big. It was like, I don't think I've ever been that loud and
Wow.
huge and clear. It was
It's like power.
yeah, it was power.
Yeah.
It was like, whoa,
Gee,
cool.
that is cool. Yeah.
So it was really neat, and it sounded good. I'm like, oh, cool. And I've got an in-ear monitor system, so like I can hear myself. So these are not my concerns.
Yeah.
I got a wireless system, okay, and I can the guy's feeding me info. I can talk to him,
Yeah.
but he can talk to me, and I have a metronome when it's relevant.
Yep.
So I figured, like, okay, this is gonna be insane, but I can do it. And then the problem comes up that Jackie Chung would he likes to just fly by the seat. He likes to fly off the cuff. He's like, you know what? I feel like I'm just gonna do this talk with the crowd. Let's do another song. Can we do another song? And he'll just look at the music and do this. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Because the environment also is like, I gotta mention, like, there's a shocking amount of things being put on stage because people are being flowers, right?
Okay.
And like sometimes little stuffed animals, but a lot of flowers. So during this concert, there's a constant stream of flowers
Wow.
arriving on the stage.
I feel like that's old school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the tune of like maybe a show, hundreds of quite elaborate bouquets. Right?
Wow,
Like hundreds,
okay.
maybe upon hundreds. And there's a peak at the end of the show where there's just suddenly he could do nothing but sing with one hand and pick up flowers.
Oh
with the
my
other hand.
God.
Just constant, like walking up and down the stage, just scooping up all the flowers.
What?
They're just constantly gifting the guy.
Okay.
He can barely get anything done. He's
Yeah.
just being gifted so hard.
He's
And
less singer,
Yeah.
more cleaner now at this point.
Yeah, and he basically is. And mind you, it's a 4-hour show, and the flowers they got more intense at the end, but they never stopped.
Wow.
From front to back, I was like,
That
how
is
many
bizarre.
flowers did people bring?
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
the whole
yeah.
audience brought flowers.
It's like an Oprah thing where it's under their seat and they're just
Yeah. So that was an interesting thing. And as we progressed along, I realized that one of the logistical issues for me was being like, besides the Australians who just knew the gig, I might have been, well, obviously the audience, probably a lot of them spoke English, but like the language on stage and in the venue was exclusively Cantonese.
Okay.
So I had no idea what anyone was saying at any point, like not even one word. So
Wow.
I didn't realize how disorienting that would be because it's a fairly complex operation. So except for the moments where the music czar would give me a cue, because he'd obviously be doing the same cue in Cantonese for the band, but then in English for the horn section and me, right?
Right.
So that was even less time.
Yeah. There's a lag on it.
There's a lag there. But then some of the songs would start with Jackie Chung just doing kind of a talking thing.
Right, a monologue
Well, conversational.
Right.
Right. And that was supposed to happen because it said conversational chit chat with jazz piano underneath, kind of like lounge singer vibes.
Yes.
Right.
Taking a moment to sort of enunciate to the point of nearly singing, but it's more just speaking.
Yeah, but he's also just kind of saying a story to the crowd, and he has a little
okay.
pitter-patter background piano, right?
Gotcha.
But then sometimes he likes to just go off and do banter, and he likes to have a little pitter-patter piano underneath, right? So the problem is, then I realized, was like, okay, so he's going to do a little banter, but then I don't know what's banter and what's song, because I've got like 22 bars to count here, and like, when do I actually do that? So it's like, because I don't know when the song started.
Right.
Because
You don't know the language.
I don't have anything idea what he's saying, so I don't know. He goes into the theme of the song. It's like no, so I'm just sort of like, if he said like, well, now I'm going to start the song,
right,
and like I wouldn't know that.
Yeah,
so
no.
So I'm sort of like, okay. So there was definitely a few moments where I was like already pretty tense, but then I'm watching, like, okay, I feel like this is 16, 17 bars of 17, 18 bars of this is piano. This is going to be 18 bars of it. I'm counting it. Okay, 22 bars coming up. I'm going to do it. Here it comes. I'm like, I just started playing, and the guy on the piano just looks at me like this. I'm like, oh, no, that wasn't it. Okay, well, if he had started back at this point, I figured like 6 more bars.
Okay.
Maybe I'll try an 8. It's just like, and I got to tell you, I'm lit really well.
Yeah. Oh, God.
I'm very loud.
And in a tux.
In a tux. I'm up on a high riser, but like I am like loud in this. When I just touch the boat of the string, it's like boom. It's like I can hear very clearly that I am mixed hot because they love cello.
God.
And some of these moments also of just like there's that tension all the time. Like, are we starting? Are we starting? Like, did we start? Am I now missing it? Like,
Yeah.
So I managed to catch a lot of those, but I was now like on the edge of my nerves. Like I'm just really in full like hyper focus mode.
Yeah.
And kind of enjoying it. Admittedly, it was wild, but
It's
I was
a
like,
high, I'm sure.
I'm doing it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then in some of those moments are just like, boom! It's like, oh, suddenly white hot spotlight on me, and it's just me and Jackie Chuck. So it's suddenly just cello solo with the guy, and I'm sight reading this stuff.
Yeah.
Hyper amplified instead of 10,000 people, and it's just like very aware of exactly what I'm doing. I'm like, woo, this is fun.
So how did it come out of the monologue into the...
Oh, those things I remember, I think
You just sort of a half second as everybody else starts?
And like you just get to be like, one of the best things about string instruments is that there is a way, like you always soft start a little bit.
Yes,
so you have
slide
like
into it a little bit.
About 150 milliseconds maybe.
Yes, right.
If your reaction time is really good, you can slide in, but there's no other strings.
Yes.
So it's like, I don't know. It's like you play the note and you hear that first 150 milliseconds, you're like, does that feel like the right note? Is this really wrong? But, so you are really like watching.
Yes.
And then after a while, the pianist, I don't know if he remembered or figured out what was going on with me, because there were a few times where I was like looking at him really hard, and he kind of would go, okay, now. Like,
yes. I would. That's what I would be looking for, is him, like, hopefully he's starting to, like, bring his hand up heavily. So.
Yeah, he's like, I think he had a lot to do, because he's still trying to like reroute when the artist is like, I think I want to do this tune. He's got to figure out, like, in his book of 200 charts in 2 languages, reroute the entire band in time for him to just come on beat 1. He needs to not worry about the cellist.
That is impressive.
Who can't understand a fucking word what's going on. Right?
Good Lord.
So there's a bit of that. And that's just one aspect of this, because there's more to come.
Okay.
So I'm trekking through the show. I'm starting to feel pretty good with myself, because I feel like, with a few very minor bloops, it's like I've pretty much nailed it so far. I've nailed all the solos, and I'm like, I'm mixed high. I'm starting to feel pretty good about it. I'm like, and we're coming up to the musical, and I'm like, and all that stuff that I was shedding back in the dressing room.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna fucking nail this shit. I'm like stoked for it. We get to the part, and there's been dancers. There's been like some dialogue, and there's some costuming, and then there's some dancers. There's some dance routines happening. I'm like, okay, cool. It was all good. And then we get to the part, and I guess it's some kind of a storm sequence. Like da 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 da.
Dramatic.
Classic, like
melodramatic
classical music trope is like the storm.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm riffing away, like just playing all these crazy tremolo scales, like chromatic stuff, and charging through these things of flipping pages like mad and just chugging through it. And the band's going nuts. And then I just feel this, and I feel like, what is that? As I'm sort of like looking at the thing, it's like this big hydraulic platform right beside me is coming up. And I'm like, what is that beside me? And I'm kind of looking over a little bit, sort of out of the back of my, and I see this guy, a couple people in these massive costumes that have these long extension arms, and they're kind of dressed as birds.
Okay.
And these long, like, aluminum, like, rods that they're holding have giant wings on them. And then the storm starts happening crazy, and these guys were at the top of the stage, like, right beside me. They just start making these huge movements with these things. And I'm like, wait a minute. And I look over at the charts. I see a little corner of one of the charts start to blow. I'm like,
no.
Oh, no. huge gust of wind comes up, blows like a whole bunch of charts loose, flies off my stand down 2 levels of risers and spreads across most of the band. And I'm just looking at this like I just like stop, look at all the notes that are just all gone, and I'm like, what am I gonna do? It's like for 1 second, and then I just like with a really quick moment, I just go whoosh, and I just dive to the ground out of the spotlight. Put the cello down, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna do this, and I like literally cover up the white part of my tuxedo because I'm under the spotlight and literally crawl on my hands and knees down to the next. Find a few of those. I'm standing next to the backup singer and she's singing and she's looking down like the corner eye at this guy at her feet. It's like, hi, sorry, excuse me. Picking up sheets. I get down to the horn. They're still on the storm sequence, by the way. I get down to the horn players and I remember a guy just playing trombone, like and one of his eyes is looking down as I'm like right by like on top of his foot, like grab this little sheet. Thank you. Crawl back up. I think it took me like close to a minute of like, which is an eternity in front of 10,000 people. Just like, and I'm hoping like probably a lot of people didn't notice unless they were very observant. You'd have to be watching, and I was trying to be as low key as possible, but I was crawling around an epic stage just with all this shit going on. I'm like, of course this has happened. Yeah. But like, how the hell am I fucking supposed to know about this? Like, it's just not fair.
No,
I mean,
of course.
Why would I think there would be a gale force wind coming up to like take my charts out?
And theoretically, that has to be an issue that they run into in the past if they've had the bird wings anywhere near.
Of course, it's probably never happened to anyone because, well, you know, if it had afterwards, I spoke to him. He's like, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Like,
wow.
Yeah. So
I didn't even notice.
Well, he meant like, I don't know why that I don't think that it's like. He sort of gave me the kind of look that said, this is somehow your fault. I'm like, oh, God. This is just not fair.
Yeah.
But anyways, so I get back up there and I sort up the charts again and I kind of figure out eventually where we are. At this point, I think we're talking about 3 minutes, maybe even 4 minutes.
Okay.
Like the storm's now over. And I'm just like, God damn it. After like doing so well and just like on the edge, just like to have this happen, it was like, of course this happened.
And to have no cello during that, after having it during the storm, for having it for so long, it probably really, a lot of the body was gone.
Maybe, but at that point, the one thing probably no one noticed was musically because everyone in the whole band was just ripping it. So there was so much sound, I doubt anyone heard the difference. So that was one, I never thought of that. That is one saving grace. But just like the comical aspect of it, like typical.
That's tough.
But that's going to happen to me.
That's like a Mr. Bean problem or something.
Yeah, it was very funny in hindsight. So, you know, obviously this is the sort of the peak of this. And, you know, the little extras were that I got through the rest of the gig with a, you know, smirk on my face. And then I was just like, I got off the stage. It was like, I can't fucking believe this. Like, adrenaline dropped down. Like, I can't believe all this happened. Yeah. And I think one of the trombonists was like, "Welcome to the exciting world of Canto-Pop."
Yeah,
you know,
that's hilarious.
It's like
welcome to showbiz, kid. Almost kind of thing.
It's like it's not my first rodeo.
No,
but
exactly.
This was quite a rodeo.
Yeah.
Anyways,
that implies that that's Canto-Pop all the time.
Yeah, kind of. It might be. And you know, so the tail end of the story was the second night I went back. No one actually got like angry at me, but it was just sort of like a disapproving look. I'm like, dude, it's not my fucking fault.
Yeah.
You know,
it's the weird birds. Okay.
Okay, it's just not my fault. Like really. And I was kind of more ready for what was going down, and I had already told the guys like, look, when you do this lounge shit, like I have no idea what's going on. It's like, oh, that's a good point. I'm like, yeah, it is a good point. Can you just cue me? It's like, okay, so little less, and you know, the storm sequence came up. I had gone and photocopied all the sheets.
Oh yeah.
And I had mounted them on this large piece of cardboard that was like 3 feet across. Right. So like all 7 or 8 pages of it were all in one big thing.
Oh, nice.
And I brought all these clamps and I clamped that fucker to the stand. So when the storm thing happened, I just pulled the charts off and they, you know, those heavy metal stands. Yeah. And the birds came up. And I'll tell you, the stand was like rocking back and forth. It almost fell off, almost fell over, which wouldn't even have been that bad.
No.
But like it was shaking And I was watching it, and I was just like, "That's right." I over-engineered. I was ready for you this
that's
time.
That's the engineer coming up that you alluded to. Yeah,
exactly.
wow.
It's like I just like I'm gonna make this foolproof this time. So it
Wow.
was better. And afterwards, Jackie Chan actually went and found me as I was about to leave and made sure to thank me for playing. He's a pretty nice guy. And then the band got in a bus to like I don't know fly somewhere else. Like they were going. It was a full world tour.
Damn.
But on the way out, my final thing of the story is I walked out and I stopped for a second and then I backed up as I look in this room, which is about the size of your entire apartment here.
Yeah.
And it was a room that had a mountain of wrapped flowers. A mountain. Like, this is a pile of flowers that was just the only thing in the room, and it was about 17 feet high. It was basically all the way to the ceiling. It was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bouquets.
Bouquet Mountain.
It was a bouquet mountain. I'd never seen anything like it. I was just like, looked at that. I was like, son of a bitch. It was a great, the postscript to the gig was that. I was like, damn.
That's an amazing
that's just
image.
2 nights of this tour, and it's a 6-month tour. I'm like, holy crap. They must really go through a lot of flowers in this tour.
One shop is just making a shit ton of money
I don't know
everywhere.
what they do. They must donate it to funeral houses, or I just don't even
that's
know.
not a bad idea.
Yeah, he should do a charity for funeral. I don't know. It's something. Anyway, so that was the last thing, and then
Wow.
Then I never heard from him again. Like,
No.
Here you go. But yeah, so that's my favorite worst gig story.
That is a great story. Thank you very much for sharing it here.
It's now been immortalized. I've told to a few friends, but now anyone who wants to hear it can go hear the extended version right here.
Exactly. Thank you. I always want the extended version here. What did your friend who was initially going to be part of the gig say to you?
He sent me a little video of me playing, which actually you can see a tiny snippet of video on the same place.
Oh, okay,
that I put
cool.
The other
Okay.
Stuff.
Yep.
And he said, "Yeah, you sounded good, man. It was great." It's like, "Did you catch anything with the charts?" It's like, "I thought I saw you doing something. I didn't quite catch it. I didn't maybe really notice." I'm like, "Oh, it's probably not as big a deal." As I thought
exactly.
then.
Right.
You know,
Right.
you kind of feel like the other thing about playing to a crowd that big is like I'm playing to 10,000 people is in your mind, but also like it feels like you're in another world.
Mm-hmm.
Like it doesn't feel like it's like in ways it's like less tense in a way than a show with like 30 people right in front of you.
Yeah, where they can see every detail.
Yeah, because like you can get away with kind of murder on the stage like that, especially when there's a lot of other people and distractions and jumbotrons and stuff. So
Yes, right. Good point.
but like he sent me footage and like I was definitely not only on the spotlight but on the jumbotron.
Oh,
so you never
man.
know. Like maybe that the jumbotron was on me and then someone was like, "Get the camera off that guy."
Yeah, right. Probably.
Yeah, hopefully
Wow.
they did.
I would love to see that. I would love to see that footage.
Oh, that would be. I would love to see.
Yeah,
that
the
footage,
Jumbotron
too.
feed.
Of just me like scrambling all over the stage. That is just that is something I'll hopefully never replicate.
All right, well, we have the 2 final questions left, but I know you kind of talked about it at the beginning, which is you basically don't release something you don't like, so it's hard to think of an answer. However,
All right.
to push back a little bit, there
What's the
must be a least favorite. With the question, well, the first question is what's your best song or favorite song that you've written?
I honestly, I don't really have a favorite song. I mean,
Or what's a staple playing live, you know?
Well, it's
something
funny.
like
Like I have this thing where I often have released music that I'd never be able to play live. Like my
Okay, I
almost
get
my
that.
entire first record is like I'll never be able to play this live.
Right.
And one of those songs is Cloud Parade.
Okay.
Which was a very like put together kind of elaborate affair that I did with the artist and singer Marival. And it's just like a ton of cellos and a ton of her voice like arranged into these sort of clouds of sound. And I guess that's sort of like I'm fond of it because it's like my one classical moment because I'm really just ripping Debussy off really hard, but I'm doing it in a way
If
where
you're going to
I'm
rip
like,
someone off.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
You rip off that guy.
exactly.
So I do rip off Debussy, but I do it in a way where it's like trippy, and I'm making it sort of avant-garde in a way
Cool.
that appeals to me because that's kind of the theme of the song. Was I was sort of like extremely high on mushrooms one time and just started listening to Debussy, and like it kind of is like being inspired in that weird way.
That
So
sounds
it's
like a good time.
yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
I just wanted to. I was watching clouds that were turning into weird gargoyle faces and thinking like I'm getting my money's worth.
Okay.
Of this.
Yeah, wow.
But the Debussy itself was like part of the thing. So it's like, I'm just gonna write something that really sounds a lot like it, like to the point of like cribbing some of his chord like
changes
shapes and stuff, and
Okay.
an opportunity to learn. So I'll probably never do anything like that again. But to have a little bit of that vibe, which I think is some of the best of what I had in classical music, what it could be, like the most beautiful stuff that I ever heard. It's like that's kind of cool that I could emulate that.
Yeah.
In a little way.
Yeah.
And I probably won't ever do that again, but it was just a sweet moment to have on
That makes
record.
it even more special that if you won't do it again.
Yeah, probably. It's not really my jam, but it's great to do it once.
It's ironic, though, that you're ending it this beautiful description of what you did with it's not really your jam, and yet it is inside of the answer of what is your best song or favorite song.
It's just like it's because it's a one-off.
Yeah.
It's kind of sweet.
And so it's stuck in your mind as something you really like.
Yeah, it wouldn't be an artistic direction for me. I'm not going to be aping classical music in that way.
Yes,
it's
I
just
see.
like I finally had an excuse to just do it in a way that I felt like, okay, I'm legit doing this the right reason is that I'm going to break it down.
Yeah.
But I'm going to steal all the things that are great about Debussy and stick them in this song.
and you theoretically by that point had developed. I always feel like even if people rip something off, unless it's extreme or really clear, it's going to come through you anyway. So your footprint or your thumbprint or whatever you want to call it will be on it.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it is still me like doing Debussy. But
Yes.
I think it's also like probably public domain anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
So
good point.
It's not that big a deal really, but there was a reason for doing it, you know, so I felt okay about it.
Right.
But then, you know, now that's kind of done. So
yeah.
I don't know what the worst thing.
Yep.
I don't know that song where I had the phone on it. Like
Yeah,
that is,
okay,
I wish
might
I
be
hadn't
that.
done that.
Yeah.
But I still think it's a kind of great song. It's just, and all the rest of the recording is pretty good actually. So,
But that can still be your answer. You don't like that.
I mean, there's that. I mean, what else? Anything on the?
What do you well, yeah, you sort of answered what you play least because it's more of an issue with how you would technically do it as opposed to not liking something.
Yeah,
but,
I mean, the ambient record is just such a beast that's just like it's just supposed to be a record. Like you just put. In fact, I really intended to be something you just spend half an hour listening to in one shot. It sort of takes you on a journey. It ends with a Cloud Parade song, and you're good to go. You know, but it's a pretty intense half hour.
Yeah,
and then. It just was never intended to be played, so there's that. And then there's songs like, if you were going to say the one I like to play, I mean, a real simple one that's just sort of like your classic kind of like you loop a chorus and a, you know, verse kind of thing and go back and forth through a couple chords and play some melodies, which is a staple of anything loopy, is Terms of Desertion. Which I just kind of made up to play live because I realized I was going on my very first tour, which was actually my first show for this in Berlin back in 2019.
Wow.
And I was going to go and I had this idea I was going to mostly sort of improv because I realized I couldn't play anything on my record. And I was like, damn, I can't just improv my first gig. That's
people have shown up to...
Yeah, this is stupid.
Yeah.
So
you could do a little bit maybe, but...
Yeah, well, trust me, I did. But I did, but I decided that I just 3 nights before I decided I got to write some songs. I ended up like writing like 2 or 3 songs.
Damn.
And 2 of them actually managed to get to the second record. And one of them was that song, which is just like, oh, I'll just crank these things together. But it just ended up being a song that people would just say like, I just love that song. It's great. They just loved it. So I was like, yeah, I should put this on the record.
Yeah.
And it almost would have been something that I almost might not have put on the record because it's kind of, as far as looping cello go, it's kind of basic bitch, you know.
Okay.
You know? But
that could be the answer to why a lot of people like it, though. To be honest,
and it's it is. I've grown to like it.
Okay.
And I see its strengths. You know, I'm glad people mention it too because I'm like, no, I do like this.
And yet, it's a candidate for this question.
I guess so. Yeah. Because it's like in some ways, no, I don't really dislike it. Man, is there anything that's like?
I mean, it makes sense that to go back to the telephone vocal effect, you disliking, and then that colors the issue of that version of that song.
For me, I guess maybe in some ways that I feel, I guess I'm going to twist your question and keep pushing back, but because I just don't see things in terms of black and white. I don't have a favorite. I don't have a worst.
No, I
don't.
understand.
You know, those terms don't apply to music for me because so many things. Like there's some things I just do not like in music, and there's some things that I just love so much. But there's a gray area between everything.
Certainly.
You know, I can't really have a favorite band. You know, I have a close to favorite band.
No, I don't like
Close.
answering those questions.
Yeah, they're terrible
but
questions.
I agree, but they
stimulate
they
answers.
stimulate conversation. Right.
I will say though that I feel like I probably want to get out of the material and put it away and do something else before anyone else is ready to let go of it. So it's like I just want to keep moving ahead and do something new, and I figure people are just bored of the shit, and I better keep, you know. And I really do need to, like, you know, find some time to really write some more music now.
Yeah.
But probably it's not quite the way that other people feel about it.
Yes. Okay, I understand.
You know, so there's that aspect too. Is like, you know, some way, like all of the songs I play now are my least favorite to play because I don't want to play any of them. I just want to play a completely new set.
That's a valid answer in my opinion.
Okay, good. So
That's
there you
a
go.
valid
They're
answer.
kind of all my not favorite songs,
Yeah.
and they kind of all are my favorite songs.
Yeah. But just this idea that now you want to focus on the new thing, and so you're leaving those in the dust.
I kind of remember like Scott Walker, who's quite an influential artist for me. All the influential artists for me are people that probably most people would not think that I would be influenced by.
Yeah, okay.
Like Scott Walker, like Van Halen,
Yeah,
Deerhoof. I don't sound like any of them.
No.
But yet they are very influential to me musically. And one thing I remember him saying was he'd recorded some record and he brought the label executives to come in. And he's like, yes, I had them come in and we played them on the big speakers in the studio very, very loud. Because I said, if you could all just be quiet while we listen to it, because this will be the last time I will hear this record. And they're about to put it out. He's like, I will never hear this record again. And he would make a record and then never listen to it again. He's like, people have sent me some of the stuff I did in the 60s as reissues, very kindly sent me a copy of the reissue in case I would like to hear it, but I never listen to it because I do not listen to anything once it's complete.
That's living in the moment.
Definitely is. I'm not that guy. I mean, I occasionally like to go back and go, oh, this was nice. You know?
Exactly.
But I don't do it all the time.
It's
but
like looking
once in a
at
while.
musical notches on your wall, if you could relate it to when you're growing up and the height,
Yeah.
you're measuring your height.
It's kind of enjoyable to remember the times that you did it.
Yeah.
I sometimes listen to old records I produced for other artists. I'm like, oh,
That's
I remember
cool.
all
I
these
get that.
things. That's cool, you know?
Yeah.
So but it's interesting that he just wants, he's like a shark. He
Yes,
can't stop. He has to keep moving ahead.
moving,
you know?
otherwise he dies,
that
right?
That
Yeah.
is an obsessive kind of
That is.
attitude.
That's
which-
how you work from the 60s onward. You know?
Yeah. I mean, that's probably not me exactly, but there's a hint of that with me. I don't want to slow down because then I feel like that's the moment when I actually will get old.
Yeah. Okay, I see. Wow. Yeah. What a way to nearly end it.
Yeah.
I want to ask one final question, though, because
Sure.
I do like playing a song at the end of the episode.
Oh, sure.
Usually that choice is the worst song, but you've sort of answered that differently. So then what I will ask you is, what song should we play?
Would I play?
Can you nominate one that maybe, okay, yeah, you're not thinking about worst or best, but maybe one that's more in line with your taste right now, which you said is moving more back into the challenging thing than the feel connection thing?
Oh, that's gonna be tough too. Because I'm like, what is really there on the docket that? You know what? How about a deep, or like the kind of a deep cut? How about
Perfect.
a throwback?
Yep.
Let's do something from the first Our Founders record,
Okay.
because it's the first time that I ever really try to do something a little bit more ambitious, and like there's even a touch of me taking a bit of classical music and kind of stretching it a little bit for my own thing.
Okay.
The song on the Founders record is called "You Are Mine."
You Are Mine. Okay.
Yeah, and yeah, I really like it. And a fortuitous thing happened where my cousin, who's a really hotshot violinist out in London, Warren Zielinski, his name is, and he's
London, Ontario?
London, England. Yeah,
England.
He's been on lots of stuff. He's always in a studio, and he's a fantastic violinist.
Cool.
And I think it's the one and only time he ever visited Toronto. He happened to be around when I was recording it. And I'm like, you want to play in this thing?
Oh, cool.
This guy is such a sick violin player.
Yeah.
And I mean, I record a lot of strings, and I don't think I've ever recorded such a great violinist. And I grew up with him, too. Like, he was like, we were playing together in BC as
Wow.
kids. So
Wow.
I actually, we'd played together, but it'd been years and years and years. And to have him play on it, I mean, he did 2 takes. The first take was so good, and the second take was even better. He's like, you want another one? I was like, no, we don't need another one, dude. It's
Wow.
fucking amazing.
No, that's
so
lovely.
he's beautiful on it, and it's a neat song, and I haven't done anything like it since. So it's kind of long and epic, and it's kind of fun. So yeah, why don't I do that one? Because no one ever hears that stuff.
Okay, great. Well, then why don't you take us out? We'll just get which is the classic, just state your name again, and state the name of the song that we're going to play at the end.
Well, funnily enough, I don't think I ever did at the beginning, so there you go.
Well, I mean, you referenced yourself as Mike in stories, so I feel like people...
Yeah, true enough.
But,
so I'm... what was the other thing? You want my name and what else?
Name and the song that we're about to play.
Oh, yeah. So I'm Michael Peter Olsen, and this is from my earlier solo project, Our Founders, from the record called The Nines from 2013, and this song is called You Are Mine.
Awesome. Thanks for coming on, man.
My extreme pleasure.
This is great.
Thanks, man.
Honesty has no place in our happiness. Lip service will do the rest of the talking for us. A purchase for your affection, to vie for your obsession. Fake that we have time. Living up is impossible. Giving up seems inevitable. Face, your smile is hard, and I see you've already dug in. Pull my hand away, why stay? If you're on tonight, then babe, I'm gone tonight.